Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order this Tuesday, March 26th meeting of the Pierce County Council. The time is 3:02 p.m. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Campbell.
Here.
Councilmember Krueger.
Here.
Councilmember Denson.
Here.
Councilmember Herrera.
Here.
Councilmember Hitchin.
Here.
Councilmember Morrell.
Here.
And Councilmember Mello.
Here.
There are 7 members present, Mr. Chair.
We have all 7 members present and a quorum. Today's moment of silence is dedicated to those who remain missing in the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore, Maryland. The collapse occurred early this morning when a container ship lost power and struck the bridge. 6 construction workers were on the bridge at the time of the collapse and remain missing at this hour. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag led by Councilmember Hitchin, followed by a moment of silence dedicated to the 6 individuals who are still missing in the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge, and then the land acknowledgement read by Councilmember Hitchin. Councilmember Hitchin.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional homelands of the Coast Salish tribes. Coast Salish people have lived on and stewarded these lands since time immemorial and continue to do so today. We recognize that this land acknowledgement is just one small step towards true allyship, and we commit to uplifting the voices, experiences, and histories of the Indigenous people of this land.
Thank you, Councilmember Hitchin. Item number 4 is approval of the agenda. Are there any objections to approving today's agenda as presented? I don't see any. The agenda will stand approved. On today's council agenda, there will be 2 opportunities for public comment. On the consent agenda, you may provide comment on any final action item. However, today there is no final action items on our consent agenda, so we will not be doing a public hearing then. Under Section 9 of the agenda, we will take public comment on resolution number 2024-136 when that resolution is before us. And finally, under Community Forum, there will be an opportunity to address the council on any topic that is not on today's agenda. For information on the rules for public participation, please review the bottom of page 1 of today's agenda. So that brings us to Section 5. We have the consent agenda before us. Does any member wish to pull any item from the consent agenda? Not seeing any. Vice Chair Campbell.
I move the consent agenda as presented.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we adopt the consent agenda. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll on the consent agenda?
Councilmember Krueger.
Aye.
Councilmember Denson.
Aye.
Councilmember Herrera.
Aye.
Councilmember Hitchin.
Aye.
Councilmember Morrell.
Aye.
Councilmember Campbell.
Aye.
And Councilmember Mello.
Aye.
The result of the roll call vote is 7 ayes and 0 nays.
On a vote of 7 ayes and 0 nays, the consent agenda is adopted. We're now at Section 6, messages from the executive, judges, or prosecuting attorney. There is a message from the executive transmitting the following ordinances, which were approved and signed on March 19th, 2024. They included ordinance number 2023-74S, which was an ordinance of the Pierce County Council approving a development agreement amendment and authorizing the county executive to enter into the approved amendment to the Tahale Employment-Based Planned Community Phase 2. He also signed ordinance O 2024-511, which was an ordinance of the County Council authorizing for interlocal agreements to facilitate partnerships on projects with other park and recreation facility providers in Pierce County. The executive transmitted the following ordinance that he signed on March 25th, 2024, which include Ordinance 2024-504, an ordinance of the Pierce County Council, which included a non-exclusive telecommunications franchise agreement to New Singular Wireless, PCS. And finally, the executive signed Ordinance 2024-510, which was an ordinance of the County Council ratifying the collective bargaining agreement reached with the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 612. So that brings us to Section 7, Proclamations, Recognitions, and Awards. Today, the Pierce County Council proudly proclaims March 29th, 2024 as Vietnam Veterans Day here in Pierce County. And we have some very special guests with us. I'd like to invite our recipients to the podium as Councilmember Herrera reads the proclamation into the record. Our guests include Jack Taylor, United States Air Force, retired, and a Vietnam veteran. Please come to the podium. Ruth and Andy Anderson, also United States Air Force, Vietnam veterans. Craig Doherty, United States Army, Vietnam veteran. And Richard Hay, United States Air Force, and also a Vietnam veteran. Thank you so much for being here. Councilmember Herrera?
The bottom.
I'm sorry.
Two more names.
Oh, go ahead, sorry. Last minute change.
Two more people. John Shoemaker and Vietnam veteran. We just want to make sure we get all our Vietnam
Thank
veterans
you.
up there.
Thank you for doing that.
Is there any other Vietnam veterans in the house? Okay.
Thank you for being with us. Councilmember Herrera, to read this into the record.
Thank you, Chair. A proclamation of the Pierce County Council proclaiming March 29th, 2024 as Vietnam Veteran Day in Pierce County, Washington. Whereas the Vietnam War was fought in the Republic of Vietnam from 1961 to 1975, with the United States involvement largely ending with the signing of the Treaty of Paris, which secured the release of all American prisoners of war held in North Vietnam and the withdrawal of United States Armed Forces from South Vietnam, accumulating with the standing down of Military Assistance Command on March 29th, 1973. And whereas on Vietnam Veterans Day, we honor all those who bravely served in the Vietnam War and who sacrificed, as did their families and caregivers, on behalf of this nation. And whereas for almost 2 decades, Americans raised their right hands and committed to serve and defend our Constitution as uniformed members of the United States Armed Forces during a very hard period in our country's history. And whereas approximately 2.7 million brave United States Armed Forces members served during Vietnam, with more than 58,000 paying the ultimate sacrifice, and over 300,000 sustaining wounds, both physically and mentally, and more than 2,500 remaining unaccounted for as prisoners of war, missing in action, or reported killed in action, but have never been recovered. And whereas with an estimated 30,400 Vietnam War veterans calling Pierce County home, the Pierce County Council has a responsibility to create space for the public to honor and remember the Vietnam veterans and their families. And whereas of the more than 58,000 fatalities from the Vietnam War, 1,047 were from Washington State and 111 were from Pierce County. Whereas with the invention of the television and advances in photography, the Vietnam War was the first war in world history to be documented in real time for all the world to see, showing Americans at home for the first time the hardships, the destruction, and the human toll of war, and making our Vietnam War veterans the first generation of war fighters to have to openly deal with the impacts of war on their physical, mental, and emotional health in public. And whereas in a time of social and political unrest, the members of our armed forces took on the tasks and gave themselves to the duty at hand And instead of being welcomed home to a grateful nation like veterans of other wars, Vietnam veterans did not return home to the cheers and ceremonies as many Americans wanted to forget the trauma of the Vietnam War and wanted to move on. And whereas, while we can never fully right this wrong with Vietnam Veterans Day, we work to correct this and let our Vietnam War veterans and their families know that they are appreciated, honored, and not forgotten, and that we have the utmost respect and admiration for their service and sacrifice. And whereas in 1982, Vietnam veteran memorials were dedicated both nationally in the District of Columbia, along the National Mall, and locally in Olympia in Washington State Capitol, to honor and commemorate those of the members of the United States Armed Forces who died or who were missing in action in Vietnam. Whereas the Pierce County Council is grateful for the faithful service of Vietnam veterans during their military service, as well as their continued contributions to our community. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed on this 26th day of March 2024 by the Pierce County Council that Friday, March 29th, 2024 is Vietnam Veterans Day in Pierce County, Washington, and we encourage all community members to commemorate this day by honoring our Vietnam veterans and showing appreciation for their sacrifices.
Let's
Thank
give
you,
them a
Chair.
round of applause. We're so grateful that you're here. We're very, very grateful for your service. We would love to hear from one or all of you who are willing to share with us. Who's the spokesperson today?
Ruth can.
Thank you for having us today. Thank you, Paul, for arranging this. Those of us who stayed on active duty after our service in Vietnam didn't face some of the problems that those who came back to communities that didn't welcome them did. So I've always been grateful that I had a full career. I was not a nurse, so I'm proud of the nurses who were there, but please be advised that not all of us women who served in Vietnam were in the medical business. Some of us were doing other things, like, in my case, intelligence. So thank you for honoring us. It's an honor to be a member of this county and of our local community, VFW and Legion people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you to the County Council very much. I am probably hereditarily about the last of the Vietnam era veterans that will serve as state commander in this state for the Veterans of Foreign Wars. I'm aging out at 70. I feel really old right now, but truthfully, our Vietnam veterans are far more advanced in age than my young years. I was at the tail end. I was born Navy at Pearl Harbor when it was still a territory. I grew up that way. It was a disappointment. I joined the Army, but then again, my father was happy I didn't join the Marines. What can I say? With that said, Marines, and I'll give them their due right now, first in, last out, and every dirty job in between. That's why he was so thankful. On behalf of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, and I bring 23,487 members as of 5 minutes ago, according to my calculations. I bring their gratitude, their thanks, and a very much hello from all of them to you, but more than anything, their gratitude for what you have done on the face of this state and this county for veterans. You have made it a welcoming place. It is what we do in the Veterans of Foreign Wars. We serve all veterans. We have 546,000 veterans, plus or minus, as of 2021. I'm sure that number has creeped up in this state alone. We do not serve just the Veterans of Foreign Wars. We serve all veterans, as do the Legion and other Vietnam-era veteran groups that exist within this state. It's our privilege. It is veterans we serve, and I want to thank you very much for taking this time.
Thank you. Any other comments from our very special guests?
Nothing else?
Yeah, I have to admit that I had forgotten that today was Vietnam Veterans Appreciation. It was kind of fortuitous. I gave a talk on the Vietnam War at the Cascade Club here in Tacoma at lunchtime today. It was arranged several months ago, and I didn't realize the coincidence. But anyway, I'd like to thank you for recognizing us. As you said, we didn't get a lot when we got home, so better late than never. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I have a 3 or 4 pager here, but I'm not going to read that. But I do want to point out that most Vietnam War veterans were volunteers. Of the 8.7 million troops who served in the Vietnam era between 1964 to 1973, 3.4 million deployed to Southeast Asia, and 2.7 million served in South Vietnam. Of all the people on active duty at the time, only 2.2 million were drafted, and only 25% of the total number of troops in combat zones were drafted. So you don't need to have in your mind the idea that they only drafted them and sent them to Vietnam. There were only 25% of those, of the total number of troops in Vietnam, that were drafted. So the rest, 75% of us, were volunteers. Or like in my case, I was just following orders.
Well, we're eternally grateful that you did. Not seeing any other remarks from our special guests. Remarks by council members before we invite these esteemed guests up here to take a photo with us. Councilmember Denson.
Yes, first I want to thank you all for your service and understanding the proclamation and what you faced or didn't face when you came back. I know that this is a group of individuals that are very, very worthy and that we owe a lot to. So I was excited when I walked in to see John and Tina Shoemaker here because they are some of the leaders of a group that puts on a big Veterans Day celebration in Gig Harbor. And every year we have a theme. I think last year was our 5th year. Is that right, Tina? And 6th year. And last year the theme was the Vietnam War. And it was by far the most poignant event that we've had, and there were tears all around. There were tears from the speakers, there was tears from the audience, there were tears from those of us who were just helping to organize or be there to serve food. The stories were just so touching, and it was an honor, although like Councilmember Herrera said, I don't think we can ever do enough for you all. But it was an honor to do what we could do, and we're doing a little bit more today, and please let us know how we can support you and all of your fellows ongoing, because it's the right thing to do. So thank you so much for your service.
Thank you. Councilmember Herrera.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here today. I just wanted to, I think I said this last year, I did the proclamation last year, but Vietnam veterans have really impacted my generation. You are my father's and uncle's age when I was growing up, and so everyone's dad was either a Vietnam veteran or someone's uncle was. So it kind of impacted us growing up, and then when I went in my military career in 1990, my commanders and my first sergeants were Vietnam veterans, and 20 years before that they were privates and young lieutenants boating, steaming in the steaming jungles of Vietnam or wherever they were at. So Vietnam veteran has impacted me quite a bit throughout my military career as a kid, growing up like that. And I just wanted to, I've heard the stories of how some people came home and that wasn't right, but I saw something that Ronald Reagan said when they dedicated the Vietnam War Memorial on November 11th, 1988. And I wanted to read it. It's kind of in poetry form, but it's very fitting. And this is to all the Vietnam veterans, and I quote, "Far too long a time they stood in a winter chill, as if on a winter night's watch. And in that night their deeds spoke to us, but we knew them not. and their voices called to us, and we heard them not. Yet in this land that God has blessed, the dawn always at last follows the dark. And now morning has come. The night is over. We see these men and women, and we know them once again. And we know how much we owe them, how much they gave to us, and how much we could never fully repay. And not just as individuals, but as a nation, we say, we love you and thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Herrera. Councilmember Coover.
Thank you, Chair. I'm always at a loss of words that can express the gratitude for what you all did, giving your life to the country. But if I may be indulged, I'm wondering if perhaps someone might share what a day was like, or a week, or a month, in your service, and particularly, I'm thinking in intelligence, and if you could describe maybe what it was like, or I don't know if there was something intriguing, or maybe someone else has something that they can share to tell folks what it was like.
I do have one. Speaking of poignant stories, I was the editor of the weekly Air Intelligence Summary for 7th Air Force. So I was at Tan Son Nhut Air Base, Vietnam. And we were in an unair-conditioned building. It was pretty poor, fans overhead and whatnot. And a chap who was sitting about where you are, Councilmember Krueger, was in charge of knowing where our prisoners of war were, how many we had, where they were imprisoned. It's 67 to 69 that I was there, so we didn't know a lot about them at that time. And every night, he would go over to his safe, and he would say, well, I'm locking the boys up again. That was hard.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
I was in Korea in 1974 when everything in Southeast Asia was going pretty much down the hole. We got word to weaponize all our vehicles and stand ready for orders. This was in late October, early November of 1974. We were stationed at the Hump, which was down below Seoul in the middle of the country, 5 miles from Osan Air Force Base. We got the word that Air Force One would be landing at Osan Air Force Base immediately, and that we were to proceed to all checkpoints, all bridges from there to Seoul, and hand off to the 140th, the presidential motorcade that we didn't know was coming until 5 minutes before. The reason why it came, everything in Southeast Asia was going bad. It was not looking good, and North Korea was making a lot of effort to make it so in our region. Jerry Ford showed up and kept us out of a shooting war in Korea that we thought was coming. We were very blessed to have him as Commander-in-Chief. That was the one day I remember the most.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing that reflection. Vice Chair Campbell.
Thank you for sharing. Hard to follow up on that, but what I'd written down, and Councilmember Herrera kind of started with, we're same age, and it was the fathers and uncles that were serving. My father, Vietnam era veteran, and 3 uncles, and it was a variety of jobs. One was stateside, one was on, I think, a cruiser in the Pacific. One was on a wooden mine sweeper heading up and down the rivers of Vietnam. And Uncle Dave was Marine Recon. Uncle Dave doesn't talk about the war. He came home and locked himself in the room for 60 days, coming out only to eat, go to the bathroom, and remain in the room. And so growing up, family holidays was often a topic of discussion about the various things and what other people that they knew. And so, much like you, through osmosis and, it's the duty of families to make sure that the next generations hear these stories, even if it's not directly to us. It is just allow us to be in the room during the conversation. We learn so much, and so eternally grateful for so much that I learned just by listening to many of the stories. And thank you all for your service.
Thank you, Vice Chair Campbell. Well, in closing, I'm really grateful that Councilmember Herrera makes it a point that we honor our Vietnam veterans in this community with this proclamation and other ways that we can meaningfully reflect and remember and say thank you. One of those symbols is the flag here in Chambers. We have the prisoner of war and missing in action flag here at the back of our chambers as one of those symbols of reflection and gratefulness. So we look for as many moments throughout the year as this is a military community and a veteran community. We take that very, very seriously and look for so many different ways where we can demonstrate our gratitude. So thank you for your service. Thank you for your many, many sacrifices, you and your families. And we would be so grateful if you could join us up here for a photo so we can commemorate the day. All the way up, yeah. The seals in alphabetical order. Stand in line.
Too wide?
Thank you again for making it here so that we can recognize Vietnam Veterans Day. There are no ordinances under Section 8. So we are at Section 9, resolutions. We have Resolution 2024-136 before us. Councilmember Hitchen for a motion, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move R 2024-136.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we adopt Resolution 2024-136. Madam Clerk, please read the title into the record.
Proposal number R 2024-136, and a resolution of the Pierce County Council adopting the 6-year advisory expenditure and implementation plan for the Housing and Related Services Fund.
Thank you. Ms. Merrick to brief.
Thank you, Chair Mello. Good afternoon, council members. For the record, Lee Beth Merrick, council staff. Before you is proposal number R 2024-136, which adopts the Human Services Department's 6-year expenditure and implementation plan for the Housing and Related Services Fund, also known as the Maureen Howard Fund. This comes to you from the Health and Human Services Committee with a due pass recommendation. For some brief background, state law authorizes county legislative bodies to impose a 0.1% sales and use tax for housing and related services, and requires at least 60% of the funds collected from the tax be used for construction, acquisition, or land purchase for affordable housing, facilities providing housing-related services, or behavioral health services, or the 60% can be used for operation and maintenance costs of new units of affordable housing, facilities where housing-related programs are provided, or newly constructed evaluation and treatment centers. The remaining funds collected from the tax must be used for the operation, delivery, or evaluation of behavioral health treatment programs and services, or housing and related services. Nearly a year ago, the Pierce County Council imposed this tax and directed the Human Services Department to work with the relevant advisory boards and community partners to create a 6-year advisory expenditure and implementation plan. And for the plan to incorporate the county's policy goals to attract affordable housing development and preservation and permanent supportive housing throughout the county, address the racial and rural wealth gap through increasing homeownership, and dedicate up to 30% of the funds to projects serving individuals whose income is at or below 30% of the area median income. 50% of the funds dedicated to projects serving individuals whose income is between 30 and 60% of the area median income, and dedicate the remaining 20% of the funds to housing and related services or behavioral health treatment facilities and related programs. The ordinance also required that the plan be adopted by council and updated by the Human Services Department every 2 years. The proposal before you adopts the Human Services Department's 6-year advisory expenditure and implementation plan for the Housing Related Services Fund for fiscal years 2024 through 2029. The plan begins on page 47 of your packet and is detailed at a high level on page 11 of the plan, which is page 57 of your meeting packet. So you'll see that the plan allocates 10% of the funds, which is about $1.7 million to $2.3 million annually for the Human Services Department's administration, and 90% of the funds, which is about $16 million to $20.9 million annually for affordable housing and related services. The affordable housing and related services funding is allocated into 4 different buckets. So the first bucket you'll see in the plan is 50% of the funds are set aside for affordable housing development and preservation capital for projects serving 30 to 60% of the area median income. 30% of the funds are set aside for affordable housing development and preservation capital serving below 30% area median income. Beginning in 2027, you'll see up to 10% of the capital funds that are reserved for households with area median income below 30% AMI. These funds are set aside to support the operation and maintenance of new units that have received funding from the county. And lastly, you'll see that 20% of the funds are set aside for permanent supportive housing services for chronically homeless individuals. The plan also describes the Human Services Department's allocation process. The department will solicit applications for funding and develop funding recommendations with evaluation committees. The evaluation committee for the affordable housing applications is comprised of at least 2 staff from a city, town, or tribe with expertise in affordable housing, at least 1 member from the Pierce County Community Development Corporation with expertise in housing finance, and at least 1 community member with expertise in housing finance or affordable housing development. The evaluation committee that's proposed for the permanent supportive housing applications is comprised of jurisdictional representatives from the cities of Lakewood, Tacoma, and Pierce County. Funding recommendations will be submitted to council for approval. which is consistent with what the code requires. The equity note for the department's proposal can be found, I believe it's starting on page 9 of your packet. There are 4 proposed amendments being offered. I'm happy to brief those now or answer any questions on the underlying proposal.
Thank you, Ms. Merrick. Before we get to amendments, let me turn to the department and see if the department has anything to add before we ask for any council comments or questions. Mr. Schmid, thank you for being here. Do you have anything to add?
Good afternoon, council members. Nothing to add at this time, other than we're just excited to get these funds out into the community for affordable housing.
Thank you for your good work, and thank you for making yourself available. Do members have any questions or comments before we get into amendments?
I have something to say on this.
Thank you. We'll get to a public hearing shortly. Well, I'll be clear. I'll be clear when there's the opportunity for a public hearing. Thank you. Do council members have any questions or comments? Councilmember Merle.
Thank you. I just have a quick question of staff. Ms. Merrick could answer this. On one of the bullets, it says broaden the eligibility for affordable housing capital projects to include emergency, transitional, and supportive housing. Could you kind of explain what that entails?
Yep. So that's, I think you're speaking to a proposed change in Amendment 1, so I can answer that now or wait until we.
Wait.
Okay.
Sorry. Jumped ahead of myself.
It's all good. Thank you for that. Ms. Merrick will go into detail. Well, before we get into amendments, I just want to state really clearly on the record, because I think there's some confusion in the community based on some email communication we've received. This is not a new tax that we're considering today. The council approved this revenue stream this time last year. When we approved it, we directed a number of things for accountability and transparency and good stewardship of these dollars. One of the things we required is what's in front of us today, a 6-year spending plan to go into much more detail about the framework, the eligibility, the criteria, who will be advising the department, the executive, and the council on the funds, the use of the funds. That's what this spending plan is about. This does not enact a new tax. It is the detail that is that the council required when we put into place. So that detail is what we're getting into today. I don't see any other hands. So, Councilmember Hitchen to move Amendment 1, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move Council Amendment number 1 to R 2024-136.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we adopt Council Amendment number 1. Ms. Merrick.
Thank you. Amendment 1 is offered to you by Chair Mello and Councilmember Hitchen, and it begins on page 13 of your packet. Starting in section 6 of the plan, which is page 10 and 11 of the plan, or 24, 25 of your packet, you'll see that homeless services, so that bucket for homeless services is changed to permanent supportive housing services. You'll see that the 2024-2025 administrative contingency is reduced to $100,000 per year, and these funds are added to the affordable housing capital funding for projects serving below 30% of the area median income. The amendment also requires that any unspent contingency funding will be allocated to the immediate following year's affordable housing capital projects that are serving those households with below 30% area median income. It also requires the department to use a portion of that permanent supportive housing administration funding to facilitate conversations between the healthcare authority and permanent supportive housing providers to address barriers to providing foundational community supports. And it totals the proposed program and administration expenditures. Moving to section 7 of the amendment, which is the administrative plan for implementation, starting on the bottom of page 11 of the plan, which I believe is page 25 of your packet, the amendment broadens the eligibility for the affordable housing capital projects to include emergency, transitional, and supportive housing. So this is, I believe, Councilmember Morale, what you were asking about. The underlying proposal from the department was for multifamily rental housing. This broadens it to include emergency housing, which may not be rental. Transitional housing could or could not be, and same with supportive housing. This is consistent with the state statute that allows the tax to be imposed. Okay. It also exempts projects with special circumstances as determined by the department from the requirement that any demolition projects receiving affordable housing capital funding must be completed within 12 months. It adds funding priorities for 24-25 affordable housing capital funding to include but not limited to leveraging other funding sources, readiness, and on-site access to food and nutrition resources. The amendment also modifies the membership for the Affordable Housing Evaluation Committee to clarify the jurisdictional representation, and it adds non-jurisdictional representative from the Continuum of Care Board, as well as specifies that the Pierce County Community Development Corporation must approve the recommendations prior to submission to the executive and council. It clarifies that projects in Tacoma are eligible for affordable housing capital funding, but will require a financial contribution from the city of Tacoma. It adds a monitoring requirement for the department to annually review the financials of each project that receives capital funding to ensure replacement reserves are adequately funded. And it clarifies that the biennial reports will be submitted to council. On the operation and maintenance funding, it clarifies that eligibility for this is only for projects that received capital funding from the Maureen Howard Fund and serving below 30% area median income. Moving to the permanent supportive housing services bucket, this is starting on page 17 of the plan. I think it's page 31 of your packet. The amendment broadens the definition of who permanent supportive housing can serve from chronically homeless to individuals living with a complex and disabling behavioral health or physical health condition who were experiencing homelessness or were at imminent risk of homelessness prior to moving into housing and need comprehensive support services to retain tenancy. It limits the requirement that households must be referred to permanent supportive housing services through Pierce County's coordinated entry system to homeless households, and allows for homeless households to be referred through other service programs such as the Veterans Administration. It adds an eligible use of the permanent supportive housing funds for connecting clients to food and nutritional resources. It adds funding priorities for the 2024 and 2025 permanent supportive housing services to include but not limited to serving individuals with substance use disorder or co-occurring substance use and mental health disorder, and for programs serving individuals living with chronic diseases, including but not limited to HIV, AIDS, or diabetes. It changes the permanent supportive housing application evaluation committee from representatives from Lakewood, Tacoma, and Pierce County to include jurisdictional representatives as well as non-jurisdictional representatives from the Continuum of Care Board, the Coalition to End Homelessness, the Behavioral Health Advisory Board, the Comprehensive Plan to End Homelessness Implementation Advisory Board, the Lived Experience Coalition, and representatives from business or the philanthropic community. And it requires the Continuum of Care Board to approve the permanent supportive housing funding recommendations prior to submission to the executive and council. The amendment, lastly, within the permanent supportive housing bucket specifies the measures that the department will report on for permanent supportive housing services that receive the funding. Lastly, the amendment makes a technical correction to the department's response to how these funds would be used to support the continuum of care. That completes the briefing on Amendment 1. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions or comments on Amendment 1? Councilmember Morrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Amendment 1 is pretty much the heart of what we're attempting to do here today. So I guess my question, and this goes to Mr. Schmidt, looking at this amendment, starting with the NOFA to the awarding of projects, dollars to projects, does this process that we're attempting to put in place slow it down, or does it speed the process up?
That's a good question. I think if we plan it out correctly, it shouldn't slow anything down. It does add an extra step for affordable housing to go to the Pierce County Community Development Corporation Board before the recommendations go to the executive. We're already planning out the particular meeting date where we plan to take the recommendations to the Pierce County CDC Board, which we're looking at August 20th to make those recommendations to the board. So there is an extra step that's added to the process, but we are planning for that. When we saw the amendments, we started making plans. Director Moss is also, I believe, online or possibly in the room. I don't know if Director Moss has any additional comments to add to that, but from the administrative perspective, it does add an extra step, but we're planning for that at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Director Moss was just bumped as a panelist. Thank you, Director Moss, for making yourself available.
Hi, for the record, my name is Heather Moss, Director of Human Services for Pierce County. What I would add just more broadly to what Brian shared is that there are a handful of increased staff obligations and expectations and reporting requirements in here that will require more capacity than we've planned for. So just, I think, important for you all to note that there's additional staff work involved in a lot of the initiatives that you're proposing in these amendments.
Thank you for the comment. My second question does pertain to staffing. In this proposal, we're limiting it to, I do believe, administrative cost to 10%, which I don't have a problem with, but do you think that based on these extra processes that are in place, that you're going to be able to keep that up to that 10%? Is that going to hinder your ability to get projects out, monitor projects? Because I think that you also have to monitor the financials every year on projects. So I'm just kind of curious from your standpoint whether we have looking at overburdening the process and not allowing enough funds for staffing on this project.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Mello, for the question, or I'm sorry, for the question. One of the things that we looked at here is that there is additional reporting requirements. One of the things that you saw is that we had a pretty large contingency allowance set aside in this plan. We've not done this before. This is a new body of work for us. So our anticipation was that we were going to staff pretty conservatively to begin with and see where that got us, and be able to have the opportunity to expand if we needed to add more staff. I think with the reduction in the contingency funds, we have less ability to do that. I think as we've identified the administrative dollars so far, we should be okay in the near term. Again, once we start seeing more projects developed and we are doing a financial review, an annual financial review of each project, that will get really big really fast. This is what I'd say.
Okay, thank you for your frankness on that. I appreciate it. That's all the questions I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on Amendment 1? Councilmember Hitchin.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to acknowledge and thank the many partners and the staff, both in the office and in Human Services, and then the stakeholders that engaged in the work to help figure out how we could make this plan better and really meet the needs of our community. Like it's been said, this is the first time we're doing this, and we know there probably will changes will probably happen in the future, but we wanted to make sure we engaged with our stakeholders, engaged with staff that are going to be doing the work to build this, so that we can have this first round go out and be as effective as possible. And it would not be possible without the comments and the read through of the language that was crafted here today. So just want to acknowledge those listening and those that have engaged in this work, my appreciation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I too want to thank the many stakeholders who help build and operate affordable housing in our community for the many comments and feedback that we are trying to incorporate in this Amendment 1. In this, not only does Amendment 1, as Councilmember Hitchens say, incorporate a lot of the feedback we've gotten from practitioners, people who actually build and operate affordable housing, and in particular permanent supportive housing. But Amendment 1 also tries to be very consistent with the code that we adopted that enacted the Maureen Howard Affordable Housing Act. In the code, we were really clear about wanting very specific advisory boards to have a say in recommending what should get funded. We said that very clearly in the code. And this spending plan just tries to make sure we're on the same page with the department. So it's really about clarification in that regard. And in the budget, in our biennial budget that we adopted, we allocated and authorized 3 new staff members to help the department stand up this new grant program and administer this new grant program. 3 new staff members. I think it's going to be money well spent. That's 3 full-time staff people that will be dedicated to the standing up of this plan, in addition to the department leadership. So I think the council very much remains open-minded to hearing if there are more needs in order to do what we're asking of them. But I think we've been thoughtful in the early part here in authorizing 3 new full-time equivalents. I don't see any other hands, so we'll take a voice vote on the adoption of Council Amendment number 1. All those in favor of adopting Council Amendment number 1, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Can we have a voice vote?
Roll call, you mean?
Roll call. Thank you.
Councilmember Herrera.
Nay.
That was an ace term, sorry.
Nay.
Thank you. Councilmember Hinchin.
Aye.
Councilmember Morrell.
No.
Councilmember Campbell.
Yes.
Councilmember Krueger.
Nay.
Councilmember Denson.
Aye.
And Councilmember Mello.
Aye.
Result of that roll call vote is 4 ayes and 3 nays.
On a vote of 4 ayes and 3 nays, the amendment is adopted. That brings us to Amendment number 2. Councilmember Hitchin for a motion, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move adoption of Council Amendment number 2 to R 2024-136.
Is there a second? Second. It's been properly moved and seconded that we adopt Council Amendment number 2. Ms. Merrick?
Thank you, Chair Mello. Amendment 2 begins on page 40 of your packet. This is being offered by Chair Mello and Councilmember Hitchin. The amendment is consistent with what you heard in Amendment 1. It directs the Human Services Department to determine funding priorities for the 24-25 funding and specifies what the funding priorities must include, but does not limit the priorities to the ones identified by council. The funding priorities identified by council For the affordable housing capital funding, include projects that have committed funding from other jurisdictions and or philanthropic partners and are leveraging other public resources. Projects that demonstrate a readiness to proceed with development, and projects that demonstrate they will provide residents with on-site access to nutrition and food resources. For the permanent supportive housing services funding, the funding priorities identified by council include programs serving individuals with substance use disorder or co-occurring substance use and mental health disorder, and programs serving individuals with chronic diseases, including but not limited to HIV, AIDS, or diabetes. Lastly, this amendment directs the Human Services Department to facilitate conversations between the Healthcare Authority and Pierce County permanent supportive housing providers to address any barriers to providing foundational community supports, and to report to council on the barriers identified and their recommendations for addressing these barriers. That concludes my briefing for Amendment 2. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Merrick. Questions or comments on Amendment 2? Just wanted to clarify and emphasize this is including priorities but not limited to. We know the department has some really good priorities that they've already identified. This is just expressing some additional and initial priorities that we know the department is already working on. Not seeing any other hands. We'll take a voice vote on the adoption of Council Amendment number 2. All those in favor, please say aye. 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 Opposed, nay. I hear division, so Madam Clerk, will you please take a roll call vote?
Yes.
This is on the vote of Amendment 2 stating council priorities for the use of the funds.
Thank you. Councilmember Hinchin.
Aye.
Councilmember Morrell.
No.
Councilmember Campbell.
Aye.
Councilmember Krueger.
Nay.
Councilmember Denson.
Aye.
Councilmember Herrera.
Nay.
And Councilmember Mello.
Aye.
The result of that roll call vote is 4 ayes and 3 nays.
On a vote of 4 ayes and 3 nays, the amendment is adopted. That brings us to Amendment number 3. Councilmember Krueger for a motion, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move R 2024-130, Amendment 3 to 136 for discussion. I get there.
Was there a second?
Yes.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we adopt Council Amendment number 3. Ms. Merrick.
Thank you. Amendment 3 begins on page 42 of your packet. It's being offered by Councilmember Krueger. Adds a funding priority for the 24-25 affordable housing capital funding to include projects that demonstrate they will prevent the displacement of local residents and allow people to reside in safe and affordable housing in their own communities.
Thank you. Questions or comments on Amendment 3? Vice Chair Campbell.
I guess just more comments, and want to thank the sponsor for bringing this forward. I think that this is a great hedge, as we discussed at study session, against gentrification in many of our neighborhoods, and I think goes a long ways towards getting the priorities in the direction we want them to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? I don't see any. We'll take a voice vote on the adoption of Amendment number 3. All those in favor of adopting Council Amendment number 3, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion is adopted. That brings us to Council Amendment number 4. Councilmember Morrell for a motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Council Amendment number 4 to Proposal R 2024-136.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we adopt Council Amendment number 4. Ms. Merrick.
Thank you, Chair Mello. Amendment number 4 begins on page 44 of your packet. This is being offered by Councilmember Morrell. It directs the Human Services Department to facilitate conversations with housing developers to identify opportunities for affordable housing developers to provide technical assistance or build capacity with market rate developers or other developers who may be interested in developing affordable housing. The amendment also requires the department to report to council on the opportunities identified and recommendations for implementing these opportunities.
Are there questions or comments on Amendment 4? I want to thank Councilmember Morrell for bringing this forward. we had good discussion about this, and I appreciate the discussion ahead of time about this. And I think it's a really smart move for, this does direct the department to do more work, but I am going to be supportive of this. And I think this is a wise ask of our professional staff to work with partners like the Affordable Housing Consortium and other partners to help grow the capacity of housing developers in this community so that they can take advantage of more programs and hopefully build. This is all in the interest of trying to get more folks to build affordable housing. So this is an additional ask of the department. I heard Councilmember Morell express some concern about that earlier with Amendment 1, but I'm going to go ahead and support this because I do think that we need to grow our capacity for housing developers, and I think this is a wise move. Thank you, Councilmember Morell, for bringing it forward. We'll take a voice vote on the adoption of Council Amendment number 4. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. The motion is adopted. We have Resolution 2024-136 before us as amended. We're going to, if I don't see any other hands now, we're going to open this up for a public hearing. We're going to start here in council chambers for a public hearing on this 6-year spending plan as amended. We'll start with those who have signed up, and I have Tim Fairley first signed up. We're going to ask you to state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to make your remarks. There'll be a timer on the TV screen to your right here in chambers.
Thank you. Tim Fairley, Tacoma Volunteer Outreach and Resources. I'm in support for this Maureen Howard Act. Some people seem to think there's going to be problems with it, but you can never predict the future of anything in life. If you do not take that chance forward, and knowing that you have 2 years later to maybe make some adjustments, you're not going to fail. You cannot change the past, but you can write the future together. And I appreciate you for passing this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fairley. Anyone else in chambers wishing to provide comment on this 6-year spending plan, please come to the podium, state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to make your remarks.
I don't think.
Could you introduce yourself for the record, please?
Yeah, my name's Nikki Hall. I don't think that some of the things that is being discussed is okay. Starting with the affordable housing, do you notice that all these apartment developments around you, even downtown, they're for the wealthy, not the poor, okay? Have any of you had to live most of their lives with a disability or be elderly? I know you're elderly, okay? Our government is already shutting things down. Do you know that the affordable phone service, this is the last month that anybody that is poor and that doesn't make at least $17,000 a month, and you're wanting to open affordable housing for people that you are allowing because you've had your chance like Oregon did, I'm glad that Idaho said no to drugs, 100%. Because if you ever take 5 minutes before you go home at night, walk around this town and look at fire trucks sitting on the part of the road. I have stopped, looked at a fire truck and said, are you going to put that tire rolling down the road out of fire? No. They drive off as it's rolling down your city streets, downtown Tacoma, and leave it burning. I go over, I break glass on a building that I see a fire extinguisher. I run over there and I put the fire out. Because that's not okay. That's not safe. Do you want your children walking around with a tire rolling down the street on fire? If you're going to put somebody that has got a substance abuse, and I've had 2 parents because I used to actually be in an electric wheelchair. My right leg is actually a pipe inside of it, okay? I was born with polio because of 2 drug addict parents, okay? I used to be in an electric wheelchair from 6 months until I was 19 years of age. Paul already knows that. We've had a discussion, okay?
Excuse me, Nikki. I need you to be at the podium so that folks participating at home can hear you.
Affordable housing is wrong. when you guys are building apartments, wanting people to pay tax money to build more apartments for the people that are rich and say that they're for the affordable housing. Take a look around. How many homeless people are here because they're not getting affordable housing? Many. There's almost 200,000 people in America as of the end of this month not going to have government funding phone service. If you don't think so, why don't you all think about downloading this app? It's called Fresh. It's not only for the food stamps.
Thank you.
It's also for what you are going to end up getting. It's called Social Security, which is SSA.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Please state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to make your remarks.
Yes, my name is John Leslie. I'm a lifetime resident of Pierce County. I also had mouth cancer, and I have days, and today is one of them, so I hope you can understand me. I'll do my best. When this tax was enacted, I came down here to testify for this, and I hope some of you remember the points I brought up then, but I'm not going to reiterate them now because that's not what I want to bring forward. One thing I did note, though, when this was enacted, there was a stream of people that came up here with a title from some nonprofit or agency, and I'm so-and-so, and this is a really good tax, and so send some to me. And then there was a sprinkling of citizens, most citizens, they don't know this is going on right now. Didn't know that was going on then, but those that did said, I don't have a title, I'm just Joe Citizen. I can't afford this, please don't do this to me. Well, here we are. So what I have an issue with this resolution right now is that it's not fair. In this is money, a lot of money is being spread out to first-time home buyers, renters, seniors. We've got seniors out there who worked their whole life and are trying to get by on Social Security. We all know that doesn't work. Veterans, number of different groups, but grouped in here too, we have the addicted homeless. The addicted homeless, that's not a housing issue. It's time for us to put housing first aside. It's a failed effort. But even that's not what I'm here to argue. I'm here to argue that needs to be separated from this. I'm asking, because what happens is now we've got a competition between the veterans, the seniors, and all these other demographics, and the addicted homeless. And that draws a lot of money. And that competition shouldn't be there. So what I'm asking you to do is either vote no on this or table this thing, take it back and separate all that out of it and bring it back out as two separate measures so they can be debated on their merits, not having everybody compete for these funds like that. I don't know if that makes any sense to you. I hope you do. I have compassion for our drug-addicted homeless, so don't take from this that I don't. The housing first thing is a failure. The only housing we should be providing for them is a treatment center and housing when they leave the treatment center. But housing does not solve drug addiction, and conflating that all into this housing issue does a disservice to every group that's underneath this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to provide comment here in chambers? I don't see any, Mr. Weinsberry. Let's move to our Zoom room.
Yes, sir. For any members of the public who wish to provide comment on proposal number R2024-136, press the raise hand icon on Zoom or star 9 on your telephone keypad. And at this time, we have 8 hands, Chair. The first person is going to be last name with Pritchard. Please state your name for the record.
Good afternoon. This is Lua Pritchard, Executive Director of Asia Pacific Cultural Center. I wish to thank you for this opportunity to testify this afternoon in support of the county's spend plan on the Maureen Howard Affordable Housing Act. APCC is building 77 units for seniors at Patsy Sir Place in the Lincoln District. This will include a set aside of much needed apartments for formerly homeless seniors. We are partnering with Lehigh to help build 73 units of housing for families and individuals right next door. It is a historic moment that Pierce County will finally have its own revenue source for addressing the housing needs of the county for low-income housing, senior housing, and affordable workforce housing. Permanent supportive housing is critically important for getting vulnerable people indoors and on a path to stability, a better life. We are glad that PSH housing can be paired with supportive services and behavioral health services that are budgeted in the plan. We appreciate the amendments offered by Chair Mello and Councilmember Hitchens to refine and improve the plan. It is crucial that the plan be adopted today so that nonprofit organizations can leverage state housing trust funds, tax credits, and federal funds this year. We need your vote for more housing to meet the growing needs in Pierce County. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being with us.
Next we have last name Grant. Please state your name for the record.
Greetings, Chair Mello and council members. My name is John Grant. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for the Low Income Housing Institute, or Lehigh. Lehigh is a permanent supportive housing provider, which is a part of our 3,500 units of affordable housing throughout the region. This includes the Oasis Inn and Heron Apartments located here in Tacoma. I am testifying today in support of the 6-year spending plan and its amendments as described in the proposed resolution. I want to thank Chair Mello, Councilmember Hitchens, and the rest of the council for their hard work on this critical legislation. Establishing a dedicated funding source to grow Pierce County's portfolio of permanent supportive housing is the best path forward to address the region's homelessness crisis. The Housing First model, which gets people in sight quickly and then connects them to crucial behavioral health supports, is the empirically proven best practice. A study performed by the American Journal of Public Health found that supportive housing programs could reduce the cost to taxpayers by $36,000 a year for each client. These studies compare the costs of publicly funded crisis services, including jails, hospitalizations, and emergency departments used by individuals before and after being housed. Another report by the National Alliance to End Homelessness estimates that the cost to taxpayers on average are reduced by 49.5% when homeless people are placed in supportive housing. Please vote yes to pass this crucial legislation. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for being with us.
Next we have phone number ending in 075. Please state your name for the record.
Thank you for answering this call. This is Roxy Giddings. I have heard over and over when people make applications to join in on some kind of housing and in fact anything with government, it is so complicated that they say things like you need a PhD to fill out this form. In fact, I heard yesterday a PhD person saying it was 4 pages long and they couldn't fill it out, and they do have a PhD. So what I'm saying is if you have complications with what you're going to present to the public for them to fill out and what they're required to do, please make it as simple as possible and keep all your complications in-house. And I certainly support this plan. I just think it's a great idea to give it a shot. So go for it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Next we have last name ending Powers. Please state your name for the record.
This is Rosemary Powers. Thank you, Chair Mello and members of the council for the ability to speak today. I speak today as the president of the Tacoma Pierce County League of Women Voters in support of Resolution 2024-136. And our league has a strong position supporting the human right to shelter that we reach after significant research and discussion. Having spoken often in the past in support of the 1/10 of 1% tax for housing and related services, I've been anxious to see how our county plans to use these funds to address the humanitarian crisis of homelessness and precarious housing. Where past funding for this crisis has been on a largely pass-through basis from federal and state programs, our local tax now represents our own county's contribution to building a stronger community by supporting our neighbors in need. If we are going to end homelessness in Pierce County, we need an ongoing source of revenue to create safe and secure housing options. I've reviewed the amendments being proposed for the plan and appreciate the additional flexibility regarding new housing options for persons living homeless or most at risk of homelessness whose incomes are 30% or below of the area median income. I also appreciate the clarifications and plans for providing permanent supportive housing options for those who are chronically homeless. These permanent supportive housing options, often designed using a Housing First model, have demonstrated that behavioral health and substance use issues in particular require more than housing alone. Success cannot be achieved without significant investment in wraparound services, and failures of the model largely reflect lack of investment in a continuing way. Finally, identifying additional partners beyond jurisdictional representatives to participate in planning and evaluation of projects offers broader accountability, and I appreciate that. I urge a positive vote on the advisory and implementation plan as amended. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Next, we have last name DeShazo. Excuse me if I mispronounced it.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Amanda, we can hear you.
Sorry, did you say you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear
perfect. Thank you. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, members of the council. I'm Amanda DeShazo. I'm the executive director of the Tacoma Pierce County Affordable Housing Consortium. I'm here today to express our strong support for the advisory spending plan associated with the Maureen Howard Affordable Housing Act. This initiative marks a crucial moment in our ongoing efforts to tackle the affordable housing crisis and homelessness in our community. Through our collective experience, we've come to recognize a crucial fact. The key to ending homelessness is providing secure and easily accessible housing. This principle is not just an abstract idea, but a practical necessity backed by substantial evidence and the numerous real-life success stories we have witnessed. The dedicated housing providers within our consortium possess a remarkable depth of expertise and a profound commitment to serving our community's most vulnerable populations. They're not just providers, they're partners in dignity. They're offering tailored services that respect the individual needs and circumstances of those that they assist. I sincerely thank the Council for the thoughtful amendments made to the initial framework of this spending plan. Your willingness to engage with and incorporate feedback from affordable housing experts demonstrates a commitment to collaborative policymaking, which has significantly enhanced the plan's ability to support our development pipeline. In light of these considerations, I just wanted to emphasize 3 critical points. First, prioritizing funding for the waitlisted projects is crucial. These projects are ready to make an immediate impact but are on hold due to funding gaps. By addressing this, we can accelerate our efforts to reduce homelessness. Second, the support for operating and maintenance funds is essential for the sustainability of housing solutions, including permanent supportive housing as well as emergency shelters. Lastly, we need expedited access to these operating and maintenance funds. Immediate funding availability can kickstart projects prepared to offer critical relief and support to our community members in need. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate the consortium's support for the Maureen Howard Affordable Housing Act. This legislation stands as a testament to what we can achieve when we come together to address the fundamental needs of our community. Thank you for your attention, dedication to the well-being of Pierce County's residents, and partnership in this vital endeavor. Together, we're laying the groundwork for a future where every individual and family in our community has access to safe, affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have phone number ending in 874. Please state your name for the record. *6 to unmute on your phone.
Yes, Chair Mello, can you hear me okay now?
We can hear you well.
Oh, thank you. This is Thomas Wick. I would like to ask Chair Mello if you could answer a question. I think it might be something that the community may be interested in as well, your response. But how does this 6-year spending plan demonstrate, or I should say dovetail with the Pierce County Council's commitment and goal of ensuring equity and inclusion throughout Pierce County? That's one question I had for you or the council, or somebody would like to answer that. The other thing I wanted to bring to the council's attention that many years ago when I was in nursing school, I actually worked with the Salvation Army, and they had an extraordinary program that was extremely successful. And basically what the model of their program, kind of giving you the 30,000-foot view, is they provided people with basically a place to live, safe place to live, food, clothing, basically shelter, you know, the bottom of Maslow's pyramid. And they also provided mental health and drug treatment services. And they also, you know, worked with these people to maintain sobriety. They also gave and worked with them for employment in the local community. And they partnered with local employers, and it was a very high success rate. And they even provided them transportation. So I thought it was, I know for a fact in talking with people that went through the program, they thought it was the most greatest thing in the world, because it's the homelessness, it can't be fragmented. So you can't help somebody that's homeless find employment if they don't have their basic needs met. And they can't, of course, find employment if they're suffering from mental illness or drug addiction. So anyway, if somebody would like to look into that program, I'm sure they would be happy to talk to the council. It was kind of a start to finish program that really helped people a lot. So that's all I had on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have last name Huff. Please state your name for the record.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Pierce County Council. My name is Rob Huff, and I work for the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance and also facilitate the meetings of the Tacoma Pierce County Coalition to End Homelessness. I urge you to pass the spending recommendations included in the Maureen Howard Affordable Housing Act, including support for a housing first approach in these spending priorities. Housing First recognizes how difficult it can be for anyone to work on challenges they may have, including mental health or substance use issues, when they don't have access to the stability allowed by fulfilling the basic human need of safe housing. Housing First creates a platform that people can use to work to improve their situation, from seeking treatment to finding better employment that may be able to help them raise their income to return to market rate housing. I understand that people get frustrated with the increase in visible homelessness across our communities. Data clearly shows that the root cause of our growth in homelessness is a lack of access to housing that these folks can afford. We need more Housing First, and to ensure that those housed in Housing First programs have access to effective services. National studies have shown that up to 98% of people with access to permanent supportive housing remain housed 1 year after moving into permanent supportive housing, and that between 75 and 91% of those with access to rapid rehousing programs remain housed 1 year later. Both of these programs use a Housing First approach. I appreciate your time, and I urge you to support these spending priorities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Last, we have Perkins. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Sally Perkins. I live in District 4. I'm a volunteer who goes out and takes cold weather and hot weather supplies to the people in my neighborhood in Tacoma who are sleeping overnight on the street. And I've gone out on 95 separate days to do that since last May. And what I see when I talk to the people that I go out to bring things to, I see people who are very hungry, who are sleep deprived, who are anxious and fearful, who manifest a number of disabilities, both physical mobility disabilities as well as emotional disabilities. They're physically ill. And because they live in Tacoma, in the neighborhood they live in, they get swept by the city on a regular basis. These are people who do need help, and this housing plan is actually about people. It's not just about housing. But in order for them to benefit from the help available in the community, the first thing they need is a safe place to live while they start to overcome some of the challenges that they faced while sleeping overnight on the street. They need a place with heat. It needs to be dry. It needs a door that locks. They need predictable food. They need a bathroom that's nearby. Basic human considerations need to be provided. And right now, there are not enough shelter spaces in the city or the county to serve all these folks. And so this housing plan ends up being really important in terms of being able to help people get away from being on the street and start to get stabilized from some of the awful conditions they face while they're living on the street. Then I think Mr. Wesley is exactly right. They will benefit from drug treatment. They will benefit from mental health services. Some of them will benefit from being able to consider employment. But there's a step that has to be taken in order to make that happen, and that is to provide housing first. And I will tell you, just from talking to people and seeing their faces and hearing their stories, I know this to be true to the core of my being, and I must tell you that. I hope that the council gives a unanimous vote to this 6-year plan. I don't think we need to emulate Congress in Pierce County. I think we can work together and do good things for the people of Pierce County, and that's what I hope you all will do tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And at this time, we have no other hands, Chair.
I see. Thank you. Seeing no other hands on Zoom, there is one more hand here in chambers, so we'll keep the public hearing open to allow members have a chance to participate. Please state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to make your remarks.
Yeah. Good evening, Mr. Chair, council members. For the record, my name is Alton McDonald. I'm a taxpayer, citizen of Pierce County, state of Washington. I support the plan. It's great. However, by providing housing for citizens of Pierce County who need these housing, I hope that there are services that comes along with that, who are struggling with any form of drugs addiction. Because if you have housing, you don't have services along with the housing that's being provided, then we're going to go right back to where we started. So as we show our empathy for those who are struggling with addiction and with homelessness in our community, and we provide the basic, of Maslow law say that the most important thing here is shelter. One of the Maslow law is shelter, security, and food. So as we provide shelter for those who are less fortunate than us, I would say we all should provide basic services for them so that they can get the necessary help they need to be sustained, as to get work, and to get any kind of other services that they may need so that they may become productive citizens of our community, rather than to go right back to where they used to be, but to go forward in a positive light. So as I support the housing resolution that's before this council, I also asking that the council provide the appropriate resources for those citizens who need them very well and are less fortunate than ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here in chambers? I don't think I see anybody. So we're going to close the public hearing, bring it back to the council. Are there final remarks by council members? We'll begin with Councilmember Hitchen.
Thank you, Chair. When the Maureen Howard Act passed last year, we really were very intentional as a council about how we wanted these dollars to roll out, how we wanted to make sure that we created guardrails around this, because the goal is to create more units of affordable housing at a variety of levels. There is a vacancy, a void of affordable units. So when families are downsizing for seniors or singles are leaving their family, they don't have a place in our community to go. We have not been building affordable units for people who are experiencing lower wages because they're either on a fixed income or because they're just starting their work career. We also are not providing supportive services for permanent supportive housing intentionally, where we pair the supports with shelter. So we have lots of crisis work that goes out again and again and again. We have our jails, unfortunately, doing this work. We have our emergency rooms doing this work, and people cycle through, and they are not getting the help they need, and they are not finding stability. This will provide both. It will provide the stability so the services can be provided. It's not going to end homelessness tomorrow. It's not going to make sure that every single person who is income constrained can find an affordable unit tomorrow. But if we do not start building right now, it will only get worse. And this plan starts that. It intentionally looks at how do we build housing for the income bands that the market rate, our market for-profit companies are going to build. We need all of the bands because everybody lives here. So I'm very thankful for the work that went into this. I'm very thankful for all of the thoughts that went into the work that is in this amendment and in this proposal as we are looking at it today, and that it passed, because I think moving forward it is absolutely necessary for our community to grow and grow in a healthy way. So urge full adoption and support this afternoon. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Hitchin. Other final remarks? Councilmember Morrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the comments from Councilmember Hitchens. This process has been a long process since I came on the council, 6 years ago now. There was definitely areas that I think the county has ignored. And the first one we moved forward was, I call it the bookends now, is the behavioral health and therapeutic court tax, because for so many years the county had neglected that area and had, other jurisdictions handle it. And I think it came to a point where we ended up in a crisis, that we knew that behavioral health was a real issue, substance abuse was a real issue that we needed to deal with as a community. And so we brought together a group, and we ended up passing the behavioral health therapeutic court tax. And that took a while for things to start working its way through. As Councilmember Hitchens said a year ago, the other bookend was put in place, which is the Maureen Howard affordable housing tax. And I do believe that there is a need out there for affordable housing. It's been heightened, I think, in the last year with rents going up, over 40%. And then a lot of gentrification that's taken place. And when I talk about gentrification, I grew up in Tacoma, and I knew all the hotels, motels, affordable housing on what we called K Street. And a lot of you know that those were the affordable housing projects that we had here, where you can get a room and you could pay a low monthly rent. And, we didn't see a lot of the homeless that we see now. But due to the fact that we are gentrifying some of these areas, these properties are being bought up and turned into other housing, multifamily housing, displacing a lot of those that cannot pay market rate or even near market rate. So we find ourselves kind of in a quandary, and thus looking at how the county could help and participate. I think there again, I support my work to get the Breen Howard Affordability Housing Act forward. But one of my concerns is moving this process forward is now that we have to put in place mechanisms that, one, put priorities in it, to also look at having to put processes in place. One of the comments that was stated was that this process of getting funding is very complicated just to start. Most of these projects will have to braid funding together to just get them off the ground. The funding that we supply in the Maureen Howard Affordable Housing Act is not 100% housing. I mean, it takes several sources to get this funding squared away. So adding more barriers, adding more steps, I do have a concern about that. I think that within the amendment number 1, it does talk about providing services to those who need it as a part of their residency. So I think it's comprehensive support services to retain residency. So this isn't about just putting people in a housing. It is giving them the wraparound services because of the bookends that this council's been able to move forward on. But that doesn't alleviate me from being concerned about some of the processes we're putting out there. So with that, I stand behind my support for the Maureen Howard Act, but I'm a little concerned about moving forward with some of the more barriers that we're putting that they now have to jump through to get final funding. My goal was to get the funding out as quick as possible, and I'm quite sure the other members would agree with that. So I know that there has to be structure. With every government program, believe me, there's structure. And like I say, I just thought that we could move things a little bit quicker through a process. But anyway, those are my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Morell. Are there any other remarks? Councilmember Krueger.
Thank you, Chair. And just to start, I want to thank staff and agencies for all their hard work on this. It's a big ask and a lot of time to put things together. I'm concerned and I'm a bit frustrated in the magnitude of what this entails. And to me, it's like too many cooks in the kitchen and you don't know what's going to come out of it. But also a big concern to me is the taxpayer. I don't see the taxpayer really considered in much when I'm looking at the funding that's already been available, the 1406, the document recording fees, the federal home investment, plus the variety of local and state. And I look at Washington State, I found the Washington State Homeowner Assistance dollars. There's still so many other pots of dollars that are being for these projects that the taxpayer has to cover. And to me, we're eliminating the middle class here. How many of the middle class are going to be moved further and further down to where they're going to need to be participants in this program? And that is difficult for me. It says affordable homes. There's no such thing as an affordable home these days. I've got the state that is making it more onerous for anyone to build a home. Everything is seeming to be a crisis. How many crises can the taxpayer fund? We have a homeless crisis, a drug crisis, a mental health crisis, education crisis, we have culvert crisis, we have climate crisis, we have road crisis. What else? We have endangered species crisis. We have to buy more land for the owl and for vermin and for apex predators. The list just continues, and when where does the taxpayer get the consideration in here. And that's where I'm going, it's not affordable, and we need more, maybe it's more pressure on the state to stop increasing the cost of living, to stop increasing the cost of doing business, the unfunded mandates that we have. And while I don't begrudge folks in the need of this, I want programs that work. There are good ones. There are ones that have been successful that are not really part of the government. And I just believe there needs to be more consideration and more thought in the people who are having to fund this. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other remarks? Well, I want to thank the department for the work that they did to give us a really well thought through plan. When the body of work came to committee and we started hearing from many more folks who actually have built and continue to want to build affordable housing in this community, that's where the council amendments really come from. Along with some ideas like Amendment 4 that was brought forward by Councilmember Morell about how we grow the capacity of developers to actually build affordable housing. I want to thank our staff who also helped do further intensive stakeholder engagement work with those same developers who actually have a history of doing affordable housing here, and working with the department for ever since the bill came out of committee, working deeply with the department to make sure that the amendments could be incorporated and implemented. A lot of hard work has gone into this. I was disappointed to see Amendment 1 have a partisan vote. I really see the structure that we're putting in place really mimics the behavioral health tax, the accountability that was put into the behavioral health tax, the reporting to the community, the work with the Performance Audit Committee, the folks with lived experience and the professionals and the experts giving advice, not just county staff. What is mimicked in this proposal, what is put in this proposal is directly mimicked in the behavioral health tax in terms of its accountability and transparency. So the council's work here makes the work more accountable to taxpayers, more transparent to taxpayers, and make sure that more than just county staff are advising the county department and the county council. Our work also broadened the definition of permanent supportive housing that came to us so that we could serve seniors and veterans and many of the populations that we've heard of today. And the work of the council to improve the department's plan put more money to the work of affordable housing. We took some funds from administration and put more on the street to do the real work that we want to see happen while still retaining significant capacity support for the department, who does very, very hard work. We authorized 3 new full-time staff at the department and continue to support their very important hard work. So I'm grateful to the robust stakeholder process that we engaged in, and this is highly informed by people who develop housing for a living in this community and do supportive services so people can keep their tenancy. So I do strongly recommend adoption and appreciate everyone's very hard work in this, and looking forward. I know that the department is fully prepared to put a notice of funding availability on the street starting next month is what we heard. We heard if we can approve this month, they are fully prepared to put the notice of funding availability on the street next month, April, go through the vetting process and the review process and the scoring process, and hopefully get the executive and the council a list of projects to invest in by late summer. By late summer. So that is an aggressive timeline in government time, but we need to get that moving so we can get the dollars out the door. This has been robustly reviewed, and I think our work product increases transparency and accountability, makes it much more clear, again, highly informed by people who actually build housing for a living, and puts more money on the street, less money for administration. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll on Resolution 20? No, we're closed the public hearing. Ma'am, we closed the public hearing. We're going to move to a roll call vote. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll on Resolution 2024-136?
Yes. Councilmember Morrell? Councilmember Campbell?
I'm sorry. Who did you start with?
Morrell.
Oh, no.
Councilmember Campbell?
Aye.
Councilmember Krueger?
Nay.
Councilmember Denson?
Aye.
Councilmember Herrera?
Nay.
Councilmember Hinchin?
Aye.
And Councilmember Mello.
Aye.
The result of the roll call vote is 4 ayes and 3.
On a vote of 4 ayes and 3 nays, the resolution is adopted. That brings us to Community Forum. Community Forum is an opportunity for members of the public to address the council on any topic that is of significance to or affecting Pierce County government and that did not appear on today's agenda. There is a 3-minute time limit. We ask you to state your name if you would like it on the record and address all comments to the chair. We'll start with those in council chambers. Please come to the podium, state your name for the record. Please remember our rules are such that you cannot speak on something that was already on the agenda. So other topics.
Councilman, thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Alton McDonald, citizen and taxpayer. Good evening, council members. In Pierce County, we have law enforcement that seek out perpetrators of crime, people who breaks the law, whether it be state or federal, but the ones especially that happens in the jurisdiction of Pierce County, that the prosecuting attorney office have jurisdiction over, along with the city of Tacoma. They work together, have some kind of interlocal agreement to apprehend folks who breaks the law in our community. On April 18, 2023, a young man by the name of Layman Sherrod Tucker was brutally murdered, cold-blooded, Yakima and 7th, right down here, or probably behind me. The shooter, the individual young man with a gun, has been arrested. His accomplice, a female by the name of Adriana Young, was also arrested, but somehow the police released her. Since then, there's been a warrant that has been issued for her arrest. Detective William Granlund of the Tacoma Police Department have been telling the Johnson family that they cannot find this young lady. Now, as you and I know how law enforcement works, they know how to do their work because that's what they get trained to do and get paid to do. We, the taxpayer, pay their salary. And the reason why I'm here is to use the venue so that the information about this young lady, Adriana Young, there's an arrest warrant out for her arrest for second-degree murder of Mr. Tucker. I remember when Sheriff Troyer had reported that a newspaper gentleman wanted to kill him. You have 40 law enforcement officers from different agencies reported that night or that morning to his residence. 40. Now we have a murder of this young man, and they can't find this young lady. Even though the family have reached out to the Tacoma detective, William Granlund, have been so unbecoming, uncooperative with the family. The family have to pay a private investigator to do the work that the police should be doing. This is unbecoming. This is unacceptable. Now, we taxpayers are paying the police salary, and they treat us like we are the criminals. But I know this for sure. If there was an officer or a family member of an officer get hurt in this community, the full-fledged force of the Pierce County and Tacoma, Washington State Patrol would be right there to find the perpetrator. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Council, for listening.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to participate in community forum? Please come to the podium, state your name for the record.
Yeah, my name is Nikki Michelle Hall, and I know why Mr. Herrera just stepped out, because part of this has to do with him. I moved here 2 years ago to help a cousin work because he is one of our military veterans that fought Vietnam. I also have my senior brother, which also fought Vietnam War. That's why I said thank you to our military service gentlemen as I seen them when I came in the door for what they have done. My brother was a door gunner for Korea. Okay, when I first moved here, I moved onto a property that I had not known that was illegal because some of our people that are coming from India are here in Washington that are building illegal apartment complexes and illegal trailer parks. I ended up into one of their illegal trailer parks in Puyallup, Washington. I just recently got moved to Tacoma. Thank God. From a help from a company that is a non-fundable company, and maybe with all this housing stuff that you guys are wanting to do, I think that you guys should be talking to the company that helped me out of Ording, okay, which is called Recovery Cafe. And a lot of people would think that it's for the drug addicts. They don't only just help them, okay? They helped replace me because my landlord moved here 10 years ago from India. 8 years ago, he started building illegal properties. I had to get replaced because the county was shutting him down. They're shutting him down all the way from Utah to Everett, Washington right now. And I was assaulted by one of my neighbors as this gentleman was speaking about somebody being assaulted and killed. And this man was not arrested. Thank you, Mr. Paul, for returning because you're part of this.
Excuse me, ma'am. Please direct your comments to the chair.
This man was never arrested for physically assaulting me. I was coming through the driveway access to 11108 Valley Avenue East, Puyallup, Washington. Walking through, I heard somebody speaking behind me. I always try to watch my surroundings in Washington because of people attacking other people, especially when you're walking, especially at night. My cousin hates it if I'm out past dark. He freaks. Because I am disabled. As I have spoke to you guys about me being disabled, I was born that way.
Thank you.
I am addressing the council because this man, Don Simcox, has not been arrested for an assault and battery, slamming me into a fence, injuring my
Your time has expired.
left arm. Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. Anyone else in chambers? Please come to the podium, state your name for the record.
Tim Fairley, Tacoma Volunteer Outreach and Resources. I'm requesting that we look into a county-wide policy on stopping the abuse of property managers who run nonprofit apartments who serve people with mental or physical disabilities and seniors, that would revoke and suspend a property manager's license, impose a large fine, in several training classes and mental health counseling for a year before they reinstate their license. This will also help reduce people being reintroduced back into homelessness because of a disagreement between a property manager and a tenant with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here in council chambers? Not seeing any. Mr. Weinsberg, anybody in our Zoom room for community forum?
Yes, sir. For any members of the public who wish to provide comment press the raise hand icon in Zoom or star 9 on your telephone keypad. And at this time we have a couple hands, Chair. First name, Hosford, Joshua Hosford. Please state your name for the record.
Hi, my name is Joshua Hosford, Chair Mello. I live in Buckley, Washington. I own a real estate development company, and I'm the president of the Pierce County chapter of Citizens Alliance for Property Rights. We support equitable and scientifically sound land use regulations that do not force private landowners to pay disproportionately for public benefits enjoyed by all. Through this comp plan update process, it's come to our attention that the staff has been describing the proposed removal of density in rural zones as bonus density in option 3. This phrase bonus density does not exist in current code or in the footnotes for that matter. What does exist is what's called base and maximum density. Using the word bonus implies that allowing someone to use the current code and maximize their density is being given a gift or reward. We believe that using bonus density is misleading and would recommend the chair direct staff to update their presentations and information to reflect current code. At a previous committee meeting, council members Denson and Hitchen asked staff about disclosure requirements. Staff responded that the state does not require notification. In addition, staff cited a lack of funds as the reason for not informing the public. When I asked staff last week what the budget was for the comprehensive plan update, I was told it totaled $1.1 million, all funded by grants. There are approximately 4,167 private property owners affected by this proposed reduction in their property value. Sending a postcard would cost the county less than $2,500. Given the significant effect this proposed change would have on their property's value, the chair should direct staff to notify all private property owners affected by this proposal, the impact of which is approximately $1 billion in today's market value. Chair Mello, you and I had a recent conversation at an event last week. I expressed my concern over this and a couple of other areas of the proposed updates. You shook my hand and said to me, my policies are what is in the best interest of the residents of Pierce County. It is my belief that those policies, some of which related to the comprehensive plan update are being called extreme by staff, are not in alignment with the people of Pierce County. I believe the people of Pierce County deserve to have our government be transparent in its policies and lawmaking and should be given every possible opportunity to hear about how their private property, likely their biggest asset, could be impacted by, as you stated, your policies. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have phone number ending in 874. Please state your name for the record.
Yes, Chair Mello, Council. Can everybody hear me okay?
I could hear you well.
Thank you. Chair Mello, can I ask before you start rolling my 3-minute clock, the prior caller said that Councilman Herrera stepped out. I intended to address the council this evening, so I was wondering if you could, is he still there? Is there a reason he left?
Everyone's here. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you. So I want to talk today about the Public Records Act. There's something that's been confusing, profoundly confusing to me. So the Public Records Act is a Washington state law, and it's my understanding that all elected officials take an oath of office. And summarizing the oath of office, it says they will uphold the Washington state Constitution and state law. So as a citizen of Pierce County, what I find profoundly confusing is Pierce County, I don't even know how to word this. I don't know who's accountable to enforce the law. So I made a request for public records with the Pierce County Sheriff's Department on October 5th, 2022. And I received falsified, edited, police-worn body camera recordings on January 25th, 2024. And that was after an exchange of approximately 70 email communications between myself and the Pierce County Sheriff's Department's Public Records Disclosure Unit. And every day I check my mailbox and I hope to see an envelope with the unredacted, unfalsified, unedited, police-worn body camera recordings from the attempted murder that occurred at our residence on October 2nd, 2022. And I'm frustrated because the Public Records Act, again, is a state law. And like Ms. Benson and Chair Mello, yourself, you all took an oath of office to uphold state law. You're aware that Pierce County departments are not upholding the state law. So it leaves me or all citizens kind of without recourse. The other issue I wanted to bring up very quickly is the council, I am confident, is, puts a high emphasis on equity and inclusion, especially equity. The way it stands now, a poor person or a person of lesser means is denied their rights under the Public Records Act. Because to obtain Public Records Act, to get records under the Act, you have to hire an attorney. Most citizens in Pierce County cannot hire or retain an attorney to obtain public records and fight taxpayer-funded attorneys to get those records. So I'm asking the council to please help me understand how can Ms. Benson, who represents me, not acknowledge this, not take action, because it is state law.
Thank you.
And, okay, thank you very much.
And at this time, there are no other hands, Chair.
Well, seeing no other hands, we'll close the committee forum portion of our meeting. We're grateful to hear from so many community members about what's on your mind, and folks will follow up as appropriate. We're at item number 11, other business and announcements. Today under other business, the council welcomes our Pierce County Assessor Treasurer, Mike Lonergan, to present on property tax relief programs. It's the time of year that many community members are paying attention to tax bills. One of them is their property taxes. And the council is very, very interested in making sure we robustly get the word out about how folks can qualify and seamlessly apply for everything that's eligible to them, including property tax relief programs for low-income seniors and people with disabilities. So with that, I'd like to introduce our Pierce County Assessor Treasurer, Mike Lonergan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the council's invitation to come and make sure that all of our constituents are aware of recent changes in the exemption program for reduced property taxes for persons with disabilities and senior citizens. Kind of an appropriate day, a lot of the discussion about affordable housing. We don't want anybody to be forced out of their existing home due to inability to keep up with property taxes. And so that makes it important. And also, your earlier presentation to Vietnam veterans, we serve many veterans in this very program. So I'm counting on Mr. Weinsbury to help me move through this. That's the title thing, and we'll go right now to a nutshell summary of what it is we're talking about. This is a tax exemption program open to seniors and persons with disability who have limited income by state law. This initiative significantly reduces property taxes in your primary residence by freezing value for tax purposes and exempting you from all excess levies and the state school levy number 2. The Assessor Treasurer will continue to establish the market value of your property annually, but your taxes will be calculated on a frozen value unless the market value should somehow miraculously drop below the frozen, which has not happened lately. Eligibility hinges on 4 factors: age, disability status, one of those 2, plus home ownership, home residency, and your income level. So the next slide. Eligibility, again, to summarize this quickly, you have to be age 61 or older in the previous year, the year you have income information to submit. So we're talking about the 2023 year for a 2024 tax partial exemption. And also, if you're not 61 at any age, if you've been awarded disability status, for veterans it used to be 100% disability to qualify. It has been lowered to 80%, which brings in a lot more veterans than we used to have. Or if you're not a veteran but you are disabled, if you're fully disabled and unable to work and you would furnish some sort of medical statement to that effect, then you also qualify at any age. Secondly is the income, again, for the 2023 year. This has increased dramatically. Previous years, it's based on a percentage of county average household income, and it was $45,708. This year, it's greatly increased the percentage. They've recalculated, and they've also rounded it off, which really helps our work a lot too. So now the new number has jumped 20%, or actually 40%, to $64,000. And then the next question is the combined residency and ownership. This exemption is only good for one property in any state. You can't have one here and say one in Arizona or Hawaii. It's one, and it has to be your primary residence, meaning that for 6 years and a day out of the year, you are living in that house, and so there's only one of them. Next slide. While you're receiving the exemption, we mentioned the value is frozen. Every year we send out a revaluation notice in June, and you'll see, if you qualify for this program, two values on there. The current market value that our appraisers have placed on it, and then also the frozen value, the lowest of which becomes the number used to calculate your property taxes for all the various taxing districts in the area where you live. We have status change forms online because it's your responsibility. Once you get this exemption, it's good for the next 6 years. However, if your situation changes, then you need to notify us. Otherwise, you could end up having to pay back some taxes, and we don't want to go there. Processing time, we want to alert you, depending on the time of the year, it can take time to add up all the exemptions and possible deductions, get all the attachments that need to be there. We need to have a real package to make sure that this is done fairly and accurately according to state law. So right now, we're finishing up February applications. We're really in pretty good shape. And this is thanks in part to the council adding a staff member to our budget. Instead of 4 people doing all this work for the whole county, we now have 5 people, so it's helping a bit. But the other things we've done is streamline our systems so that we can move faster. But we caution you that when everybody is filing their IRS forms by April 15th, that's when they'll have all the information they need from the previous year to submit to us, and we're expecting a flood of new applications. And I've already mentioned that the renewals are also a part of the job done by those 5 people. So we renew a part each year. And next slide will show you how that works. I mentioned you get this exemption for 6 years. And what we do is take some letters of the alphabet, your last name, each year, and do the renewals. So we have about 11,000 currently in the county. We expect to end up with thousands more with this great increase in the income limit allowed. But we have to look at 1/6 of them every year to make sure that they requalify after the 6-year period. So it actually might be less than 6 years before your letter comes up in the alphabet, is what I'm trying to say. And so this year we are doing D, E, F, and G in the alphabet and so forth. Next slide. What happens if you no longer qualify? This can happen for just 1 year, for example, if you sold something you owned and had a significant amount of income, because it's based on income, not how much money you have in the bank or even how much money you have in investments, but what you draw out in the course of the preceding year determines whether you qualify. So if an event like that happens, or you win the lotto, you notify us, and it might be just for 1 year, or it might be you no longer need the exemption because your conditions have changed. Washington State also has a deferral program, and I have to mention this. It always creates confusion. Over the weekend, I saw on the Nextdoor app online, a whole group of people had started talking about this. There's a new income limit, and somebody was trying to be helpful, said, yeah, but when you move or die, it all has to be paid back to the state. Not true. There is a program where the state will pay your second half of your taxes each year and charge you a small amount of interest, and at the end of ownership, however that occurs, they do have a lien on your property and collect it back. Well, as soon as we say the word lien for somebody who has worked to pay off a mortgage for 15 or 30 years, they see red. They don't want to have anything to do with it. As I mentioned, we have 11,000 of the senior and disabled exemptions. We have about 200 in the county of those people who are on the deferral. It's just not popular, but I do like to make the distinction so people know this is not going to have to be paid back at some later date. Next slide, we'll see the income categories and how they have changed. I mentioned the $64,000 figure. Without getting too deep in the weeds, there really are 3 levels, and they result in greater levels of exemption as your income goes down. And we are talking about a gross income. Another thing that was on that website this weekend was, oh, it's your adjusted gross income off your income tax. Adjusted gross has other deductions that we may or may not allow, but we have a list of medical deductions that I'll mention in a minute. But this is your gross household income. From $64,000 down to $55,000, as mentioned, you pay no voted taxes such as school levies or bond issues, and you also don't pay the McCleary second state school levy that was created a few years ago. So this just about cuts your taxes nearly in half. It's going to be at least a 40, probably up to a 50% reduction in your taxes. The next category is if you're actually below 46,000 down to 55,000. Well, I'm saying that backwards. 55,000 down to 46,000. You are exempt from 35% of your home's assessed value. We do not tax the full value of your home, only about 2/3 of the value of your home, in addition to all the things I mentioned before. If you're below $46,000, and if you were paying close attention, everybody last year who had an exemption has now dropped to this lowest level because they're all below $46,000. And there we take off 60% of your home's assessed value when calculating the taxes. So you're going to pay very little property taxes if you're at that lower level of income. There is an example here. Take a $500,000 home, which is fairly average in Pierce County, and tax rates have dropped as the values have gone up. We've talked about that in previous sessions. Our current average rate in the county, adding all the different property taxes together, is $11.10. So the tax rate of $11.10 multiplied by the value of $500,000 would give you a tax bill of a little over $5,500. The reduced levy rate, instead of being $11, would be $5.67, and that reduced rate based on your income categories, in the first category we mentioned, the $64,000 or less, would lower it to $2,800 instead of the $5,500. The second category would lower it to $2,400, and that third category down to $1,100 for the year's property taxes on a $500,000 home. So that kind of helps you to understand how this is a big change that has occurred here. And next, I just want to go through these kind of quickly. It is easy to find our application online. We now have fillable forms online so that you do not have to simply print off an application, fill it all in, and then bring it in or mail it in. You can do it all online using a fillable form, and there's a place to attach your tax statement and your bank statement and anything that is required to make sure you qualify. So our regular Pierce County website, piercecountywa.gov, and if you put a slash behind that, ATR for Assessor Treasurer, you would get to us real quickly. Or on the main Pierce County website, if you click on Property Search, which you see circled there, then next slide, it takes you to the Assessor Treasurer's area, where we first explain what I'm talking about right now, and then to the left, you'd see you click on Property Tax Exemptions and Deferrals. And then there are various property tax exemptions and deferrals. Some people are aware of forestry and agriculture and open space exemptions. We're not worried about those right now, so you look down and click on senior citizens or people with disabilities. And here you are. That brings you to this information, which is where the fillable form is located, the property tax exemption program, and you click to apply online. And then here's what you'll see next. It takes you to the welcome, and it asks the very questions we've just been talking about here. Next slide is saying get started. Either you're a new applicant or it is time for your 6-year renewal, and you click which one of those it is and move on one more time. And then this is where you get the eligibility questions. Down at the bottom of the page, you see yes or no. Did you own and occupy this home as your principal residence for a minimum of 6 months? Well, you're going to click yes then. And then the next question is your household income $64,000 or less? Yes or no? And of course, if you say yes, you're going to have other choices to determine exactly where you belong. Then is the question of age. Were you 61 or older by last December 31st? You say yes. And the other question is disability status, which would also be a next question I didn't really show here, but you don't have to be 61 if you're fully disabled. And next page here, we have the deductions. This just came in, I'm going to say about 3 years ago. It was a big change. We had a lot of people who said, well, I'm just over that limit, but hey, I had a lot of prescriptions. I had a lot of dental work. I pay for premiums for extra insurance, but I don't have that money to spend, so can I deduct it? And it used to be the answer was no, and now the legislature has brought in quite a long list of various deductions. Do you have any care given in the home? Any of those things that happened, did you have to occupy a nursing home for a period of time and pay that bill during the course of the year? And there are many more, but again, we allow the first $500 of prescriptions without any receipts or records of it. We just assume you had that amount. But if you had a lot of prescriptions, then you can save the receipts and get further reduction that could move you to a lower income category for a greater exemption. Okay, we're on the next slide. Mr. Weinsberry is doing a good job, and we're in the home stretch. What needs to be submitted with your application? This is where you would have to do the attachments. If you're computer savvy and can do the attachments, you can do all this online. Otherwise, just bring in these items, your proof of income, which usually is your IRS form, and then your driver's license. That just shows that this likely is your home address, since that's where you have your driver's license. And for disability, the proof of disability, the 80% VA letter or a letter from your doctor stating your disability. And it continues on the next slide. There are a number of other things that can come into play. We do have people who've placed their homes in trust. This gets a little more complicated. It doesn't mean you can't get the exemption, but we have to see what type of a trust it is that gives you the right to make that your residence for the rest of your life. And there's other details like that in many cases these don't apply, but in some cases we have to dig a little deeper. And that is the presentation. We put up here a lot of contact information. I want to mention what you just heard is the executive summary, if you will, of the seminars we're giving all around the county. Councilmember Denson has heard this 3 times now, and we're going to have a 4th one in a couple months. But most of you have had one. If you haven't, we're going through the council districts wherever we're invited and working with the SHAPE organization, the South Sound Homeless Affordability Accessibility Project. They've helped with a lot of this scheduling, and they're even bringing other social services staff from the county to these meetings that do serve senior and disabled folks so that they can get that other information at the very same time. But this is a lot of information. We're at the county annex. If it seems complicated, just come in and ask us to kind of walk you through it. We're glad to do that. But more and more, they told me just the other day, we're almost half of our applications coming in on the fillable form online. And that is speeding up and streamlining the process because, as you know, when you're on a fillable form, if you skip something or forget something, it will tell you you didn't fill that in yet. So we get more complete forms and don't have to go back out and recontact the public. And we're just very happy to be able to apply this state law to anybody in Pierce County who qualifies. So keep them coming. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Assessor Treasurer. We wanted to invite you into our late afternoon meeting for a number of reasons. One, as you illustrated very clearly, the eligibility significantly changed over the last year. We wanted to make sure we got that word out very broadly to the taxpayers of Pierce County. And also, as you've indicated, you and your staff have been very gracious and eager to get out into the neighborhoods and districts of Pierce County to do these workshops and lots of one-on-one technical assistance. And we're very grateful for that. This particular meeting happens to be on public television, and so allows for broader viewership of more folks to more accessibly consume the information at home, in addition to what you're doing out and about when you're invited, as you said. So we're just trying to make it as accessible as possible to folks. Thank you for always accepting our invitation today, and as members invite you to their districts. We're grateful that you're eager to help us get the word out in education.
All right. We appreciate your help.
Are there any questions by members before we let the Assessor Treasurer go? I don't see any. We've heard this a little bit. This was really for the benefit of the public, so thank you. Very, very good information. We'll help get more of it out. Are there any other business or announcements by council members? Councilmember Denson.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a quick note. Last weekend, I had the pleasure of visiting the Key Peninsula Lions Club and their big Citizen of the Year dinner, again on the Key Peninsula. And Robert Fisher was named Citizen of the Year for this year. He's a firefighter on the Key Peninsula. He started as a volunteer. Now he's a career firefighter. The stories people told about him were just amazing. The one that I will just quickly note is he went on a medical call with a woman who was in a wheelchair, and her floor was so rotted out that her wheelchair just kept getting stuck in the floor. So after they did what they needed to do at that call, he and some of his fellow firefighters went back and with their own money and time replaced that floor for her. And the stories just went on and on about ramps and rails and roofs, and he was there with his family, and it was just so touching. And I would just say we've got so many amazing people in the community, but I wanted to congratulate him and thank him for his just going above and beyond and just being an amazing human. Thank you.
Thanks for that acknowledgement, Councilmember Denson. Any other business or announcements? Ms. Murray, any other business by staff?
No, see you later tonight at Bethel.
Thank you. The council does have a joint meeting with the Bethel School Board this evening at 7:30. So we'll be headed out there to engage in that joint meeting with the Bethel School District Board. We're looking forward to that. Seeing no other business before the Pierce County Council at our regular meeting, we are adjourned.